Hello, everybody. Good morning. Happy Monday. We are going live today with Michali to answer a question that was asked on the AMAs that I thought was a really interesting topic to discuss. So we're just going to wait for some of you to join and, of course, for Michali to join. Hey, Michali, I see you. Gonna be trouble. Okay, I think I just invited you. Hey, Michali.
Morning.
Good
Hi.
morning. Good morning. Who's more tired? I don't know. I'm so tired. My lenses are sticking to my eyes. I keep having to pull them down because
Oh
they're
my gosh. I know the feeling. It's so scary when you really feel like it's going to be stuck forever in your eyes, you know?
keep pulling my lid down. I'm today's a day for glasses, but I just hate glasses. They make me dizzy, so we're just gonna.
You and me both, Faye. I did not know we had that in common. Oh my goodness.
I did not. I thought I was the only person. I kept thinking.
No. I hate wearing glasses. I mean, I think glasses are amazing, but it gets me so dizzy. So
Same here. Apparently, you have to just get used to it, but I just never
yeah.
went through that learning curve, and I never got used to them. So
I
this
also
lens
want
is for me.
to look up and down without it being blurry, you know?
Yeah. So yeah, glasses just are not a thing. Anyways, I know that you have a hard stop. My clock on my desk is broken, so you watch the clock for me just because
Okay. Alrighty.
Okay, so yeah, let's go. Let's hit it. This question had a lot of people wondering are we saying that people that are divorced can't be therapists? And I was well, maybe.
Yeah, I was thinking about this question.
We're setting the record straight. So I think that it's an important
Yes,
question.
I mean, it's so funny because I usually Dafka don't read the question until a second before because I do very well doing the answering things spontaneously, but it happened to be that I was really taking in the question and thinking about it this morning, and I was just okay. So the actual question we're talking about is what are your thoughts on a divorce therapist getting advice on relationships? So okay, so first of all, getting advice is very different than therapy. I just want to point that out. Therapists do not give advice.
I was first, let's pull apart this question real Freudians and be
totally,
and to give it
or Jews, you know. And just a lot of this is a very common misconception. So the person asking this question, it's not that you're missing something. A lot of people have this idea that you go to therapists just to get advice. They tell you what to do, how to make your decisions, and zahu, you're finished, you're good to go. Therapists actually do not give advice. Actually, it's in our code of ethics that we're not allowed to give advice. What we do is provide evidence-based treatment, which basically means that we are teaching people tools and how to make their own life decisions for themselves. So a lot of times you're leaving a therapy room feeling unsatisfied, unsettled, all kinds of feelings that are less than positive because you're not necessarily getting the advice that you thought you were getting. But what you are getting is a lot of homework on how to apply really tough tools and how to learn skills so that you can do this all on your own. So that's first of all. Yeah. Now, if you're referring to what?
It's very important, first of all, because it kind of once we establish that the therapist is not giving advice, all of a sudden, whether they're divorced or not becomes less relevant.
Exactly. And so I think that if you're going to a therapist, and you happen to know that they are divorced, that fact in and of itself is not an issue at all, okay? Because they're not drawing from, or they should not be only drawing from their own life experiences. They should be drawing from primarily their training. Now, I'm a big believer, and this is something that I teach anyone who I've supervised, is this idea of using your own clinical intuition. Okay. And what that means is that your intuition comes from both your personal life experiences and your training. So I don't think that it's bad for a therapist to use their gut in a therapy room. However, and this I'm speaking directly to the client, If your therapist is disclosing about their lives, about their divorce, about what they did, and they're superimposing that onto your life, that is a huge red flag. Therapists should not be sharing about their life traumas. They should not be sharing about the specifics about their divorce with their clients. And there's a lot of reasons for that. It's interesting because sometimes I get pushback from clients, like, why can't you just tell me about da 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 da? And the reason that I'm not going to just talk about da 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 is because even if I've had the exact same life experience as my clients, which oftentimes I have, it's like kind of like it doesn't matter because we're two totally separate, different human beings with different personalities, with different upbringings, with different preferences and different goals. And so it would be arrogant of me to think that I can put that on another human being, whether they're a client or a friend. Now, I think that again, I might have learned, right? If, let's say in this case, if I was that divorce therapist, I may have learned, like, okay, fine, this structure of navigating things is helpful and it happens to be consistent with what the research says, then that is something that would be appropriate as this kind of therapist to share with the client. However, if it's like, yeah, I know it's so hard and da 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 da, like just talking about it in like that kind of way, that would be inappropriate. So basically my answer is yes, it is totally fine to go to a divorce therapist for help on your relationship as long as they're following the code of ethics. And it's on you as the client to trust your own intuition. And if something doesn't feel right, you can bring it up in a session. If the therapist doesn't respond well, then that's your time to look for a new therapist. So that's kind of my answer.
I love. I think that's like, I don't know if there's anything for me to add. I think that like people have this idea that therapists are perfect and have from day one they were born therapists and they have their life completely together.
I'm the exception. I mean, obviously, I'm totally perfect, but other than me,
exactly.
I know what you're talking about.
That's why we do these lives, because like we were like blessed.
Exactly. Yeah, we're the two perfect ones left on the planet.
But I think it's important for people to realize that like even if you're going to a therapist that's married, like you never know if they're like what else is going on in their lives. Just because they're married, it doesn't mean that they're in the best relationship. Maybe they are in the relationship, but they have other struggles. So like you're never going to know everything about your therapist's life, hopefully, because probably therapy would not be helpful then. And the fact that you don't know and therapy is still helpful proves the point that when you do know something, therapy can still be helpful. If that makes sense.
For sure. And also, even if, let's say, the image that you have of your therapist is like so built up in your head that they're amazing and they're doing so well, like life naturally is, comprised of ups and downs. So that means that your therapist is going to experience a down. And if you're in therapy long term, chances are you've been therapized by this therapist who's been experiencing a down at some point in your process. And the ability, the therapist's ability to show up professionally, regardless of life's ups and downs, is what you deserve as the client. It doesn't mean that the therapist is pushing aside their feelings and dealing with it in an unhealthy way. It's just that they know how to contain their feelings and the down moments of their lives and also the up moments of their lives so that it doesn't impact the client and that they're still showing up for the client in a very present way, not based on where they're at, but where the client is at. And that is a really, really important distinction.
Yes, I love that. And just one more thing to add. We still have another minute. Yeah, we still have a few.
Plenty of time.
I think that just like another point, which is almost like the spin on this, like the opposite side of the coin, is that I think that if there is a therapist that is divorced and they own it, meaning it's public knowledge or whatever it is, there is so much power in that. And I think that there are so many clients that you will specifically attract because of that.
Mm-hmm.
And the amount of healing and growth that you've been through because of that journey is definitely going to be something that shines through in your character and also most likely in your clinical skills, assuming that you process it appropriately in therapy, right. And that's kind of like something that you have now under your belt that maybe somebody that's, been blessed with a healthy, happy marriage for, 100 years does not have to offer clients. So definitely just like the opposite on this, the opposite side, it's not just, clinically okay to see a therapist that's divorced, but for some people it might actually be preference and for good reason. And I want to
Yeah.
just put that out there because I think that, there's enough stigma in the world, and I don't think this is another stigma piece at all.
For sure. And I think that if it is public knowledge, I think that it almost can benefit the therapeutic relationship to bring this up in therapy and say, look, I read this about you. And I feel uncomfortable bringing it up, but I just, it means a lot to me to know that you kind of were in a somewhat of a similar boat. And like, I'm curious how you handle that. Now, a good therapist would say, would not deny public knowledge, but they would say, yes, I definitely can draw on my own experiences to service my clients. However, I always make sure that that is aligned with the current treatment for this. And if it isn't, then I disregard my experience, because if it's counter to whatever the evidence-based treatment is, then I'm leading from a personal place, what we call transference and countertransference, as opposed to really leading from where my client is at. And so that any answer, that is not that would be a red flag to me. It might not be to other people, but at least to me, I wouldn't want anyone that I love and care about to go to someone who's going to just use their life experience in a therapy room and not, like corroborate that with the current practices and research,
Sure, yeah, and I love that. I think that's, like I think permutation of that type of response, not word for word what you said, because that's our
Right.
idea. Not one is as perfect as you, Michali. So, jokes aside, the idea that I like that you're giving the client permission to bring it up. I think that's really important. And, you as a client have the right to feel empowered and to not have this like elephant in the room, especially if it's public knowledge, which it usually is. And,
Yeah.
and think about also, like, I'm sure there are therapists out there that build empires, wrote books on their divorce and everything like that, and every detail out there for the world to see. So that's another piece that but you're forewarned, and you're you have that knowledge before you see such a therapist, that like, okay, you're going to know a lot of details that probably will not be, something that you're going to constantly be speaking about in your therapy sessions, but it's something that you have to decide if you're comfortable with that. But yeah, I think we kind of went through all different scenarios, and I hope that was clear.
Can I just say the one thing with what you just said?
Sure.
I think that like that kind of, and this might be like a separate topic we do in a live, but I do think that if we read, let's say, a book about a therapist's personal life, it does get confusing and tricky, like where the boundary is. And that is also a really important conversation to have with your therapist. It's not necessarily clinically inappropriate to write a book about a person's life. And it's similar to therapists, showing up on social media, right? And sharing with their followers where they've traveled to and like what food they're eating, or, like there's different rules for different contexts. And each therapist and each therapeutic relationship kind of has to navigate what the appropriate boundaries are for that, right? So if I see my therapist on social media is, eating a hot dog sandwich, for, dinner, it, like, what do I do with that information, right? So now I'm like thinking, oh, I guess my therapist likes meat and barbecue.
So you could be twins. Duh.
Exactly. So I think that there sometimes is a little bit of a confusing blend between personal life and professional life. And I think that it can be really helpful for your relationship with your therapist to kind of put that on the table and say, okay, how do I make sense of this? I know a lot of therapists do not follow their clients on social media because that's just like a boundary. Everyone has different boundaries, and there isn't necessarily a code of ethics for social media etiquette for us therapists. So I think that you get a lot of variety with that. But I think that kind of similar to a therapist writing a book about his or her own life, that's something you also might want to bring up in session so that you're clear on where to put yourself as the client. And then, as you said, there isn't this elephant in the room.
Correct. Yeah. And I think that was very appropriate that you brought that up. I think, like having that conversation, like remember, your therapist is human first and therapist second, and they're entitled to live like a regular human being. And then they also, because they're a therapist, need to know how to clinically address that when it's, like when it's conflicting or potentially conflicting with their role as a therapist,
Exactly. Exactly.
Amazing. I want you
All
to go.
right.
We are right on time.
Perfect.
Thank
Perfect timing. Thank you,
you. See you
Fay.
next week. Take care.
See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.